This past weekend, Leon Edwards defeated Kamaru Usman at UFC 286 in London to retain his welterweight title via majority decision. And now, I fully believe that Leon Edwards is the greatest British mixed martial artist to ever come into the sport. And I do think that he's somebody, Edwards, who for a long time was looked down upon. People were mentioning Darren Till as being the next one. There's some prospects here and there. Mark Diakise was another one, but you got Mahad Mokaev at the moment, Tom Aspinall. So many fighters on the come up in British MMA, but I believe that Leon Edwards, after that win, has cemented himself as the greatest British mixed martial artist of all time, and I'm going to tell you why. So, the obvious one who people are going to look at and say, well, what about this guy? Is Michael Bisping. Now, if we go into... first of all, let me just also clarify one thing. I personally think, this obviously the whole GOAT conversation, you have to be a champion. And in a British sense, you have to have held the belt. There's only 2 fights who have ever done it. And if you want to look, for example, in boxing, in, let's just say, the greatest British heavyweight of all time, Lennox Lewis, held all of the belts. You look at Tyson Fury, as a man who won the big fights, beat some of the biggest giants in the sport. This is why I believe Leon Edwards is, to me, the greatest British mixed martial artist of all time. If you look at Michael Bisping, so a man who was known, and this is one similarity. Bisping and Leon Edwards do have one similarity in that they were often counted out many, many times. And I personally believe, if you look at here, Michael Bisping's record was 30 wins and 9 losses. So, first of all, 9 losses is a lot, but context needs to be added. So, Bisping lost his last 2 fights. Got knocked out by Kelvin Gastelum and got choked out by GSP. Before that, he obviously beat Dan Henderson in his rematch to retain his belt, won the belt against Rockhold, beat Anderson Silva, beat Talis Latus, and beat CB Dollaway. So there's a lot of... and then before that, lost to Rocco. So there's a lot of up and down with Bisping and what he did in his career. But one thing you can't deny, the guy always came to fight. And that's one thing why I believe they gave him the GSP fight instead of Woodley. Because with Woodley, we remember the Damian Maia fight where he stunk the place out. And one of the... Now there's been a few stinkers like the Adesanya Romero fight. You got the Rose Namajunas and Esparza fight, which were very poor title fights. Even if you want to look at some Usman's ones, like against Masvidal the first time, even though I understand. Alright, the Rose one I didn't understand, but for a lot of these other approaches, I understood why they were a bit boring, these fights. But in relation to the Woodley Maia fight, Woodley put on a poor fight, and Dana White said he knows that Bisping will come to fight, and obviously GSP wanted the middleweight belt as he was the one thing he hadn't done in his career yet. And then if you look down the list of Bisping's career, so it's been very inconsistent, and this is probably a good way to look at it. So Bisping beat Matt Hamill, he then lost to Rashad Evans, then on a 3-fight winning streak, then got knocked out by Dan Henderson, beat Dennis Kang, lost to Vanderlei Silva, then went on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, almost a 10-fight winning streak. Actually, no, let me correction there. He obviously went on a 4-fight winning streak before losing to Chael Sonnen, beat Brian Stan, lost to Vitor Belfort, beat Alan Belcher, lost to Tim Kennedy, beat Kung Lee, lost to Rockhold. So this is what Bisping was. Bisping was very much a win one, lose one. Occasionally he may go on a bit of a run, but there's nothing really there with Bisping that would really suggest to you at a point he was going to become champion. And then there's a point in time where it all just completely went together for him. If we go from CB Dollaway, he then beat Talis Latus, then had the win against Anderson Silva, even though that fight was a bit dubious in a lot of the stuff that happened. Remember the Silva essentially knocking him out, but obviously he thought the fight ended when it hadn't. And then after the Anderson Silva fight, he came in for Chris Weidman because obviously he got injured. and he was supposed to fight Lou Rockhold the second time around. He then knocks out Rockhold because Rockhold was way too confident in the fight, and then Bisping kind of put on an absolute, just a easy knockout for him, pretty much. There was nothing really with that fight where I thought Bisping was going to win. I felt it'd be hard for him, but Rockhold was carrying his hands very, very low, and it's not something that Rockhold always does. And he was an underdog in the fight, and also the fact that he lost to Rockhold before, got choked out before, it just, you never really thought Bisping was going to do much in that fight. But he pulled out, knocked him out in the first round, and that left hook was timed beautifully and a beautiful finish. Then had the rematch with Dan Henderson in Manchester, which nobody really thought was the right decision, if being honest, but because of the history, the story, Dan Henderson was about to retire. Made perfect sense. Got put through hell in that fight, but thankfully he got the victory. And then you look and you're thinking, okay, can Bisping maybe mount a bit of a run here? Then he fought Georges St. Pierre, one of the greatest ever, in his first fight at middleweight, it should be said. Bisping had an injury coming into that fight, so it was a bit... He to me, fought alright fight, Bisping, but he kind of just got beat by one of the greatest ever. So I don't put that much into it, but when a man's a welterweight and he's a smaller guy coming up in weight, maybe he could have done better. And then at the end of his career, lost to Calvin Gastelum when he shouldn't have took that fight. I don't know why. Who commissioned the fight, or why they decided that was a good idea. I think if I look at the overall thing, it was literally 21 days after he fought GSP, he fought Calvin Gastelum. It was terrible matchmaking with what they did, but regardless, it happened, and then he retired after that, Bisping. And in my opinion, Bisping, like I said, his record suggests it here: 13 wins, 9 losses. Fought killers, Bisping, and especially in the era he fought, where they were all juiced up. You had the likes of and let's also not forget that his eye, man, he guy literally fought with one eye for his whole career. And then you again look at the guys you lost to. You look at Wanderlei Silva, look at Dan Henderson, you look at Luke Rockhold, you look at Rashad Evans, you look at GSP, Calvin Gastelum. They're not bums you're losing to. These are some of their best ever. You know, maybe you can argue with Calvin Gastelum. He's obviously fell off a bit, but again, there's a caveat to the fight. He shouldn't have competed that night. They shouldn't have commissioned it, but he did. And now, looking at his resume, he was seen as the greatest, I think probably British MMA fighter of all time, simply for the fact that he won the belt. But there's a bit of a weird thing with Bisping, where he did a lot of his training, a lot of the time in California, in America. He claimed British MMA, and he obviously is seen as a Brit, but he is a Brit, not even seen as one. But there is a thing of, his accent, he kind of adopted a bit of an American culture, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I think for some people, when it comes to British fighters, they like to stay in Britain. They like the whole thing of them staying in the country, training, becoming a champion, and bringing the belt back to the country. This is where I think why I believe Leon Edwards is the greatest in this sense in British MMA. So, looking at Leon Edwards now, his record, Leon Edwards, and it's actually a lot better than what people ever really gave him credit for. Edwards, we all know, for a long time has been quite often overlooked, and it's because he's a quiet guy, doesn't really talk a lot, doesn't really to put himself out there, isn't like in a division where you got Colby Covington, who talks a lot, and even Usman, he can talk a bit. Masvidal, you know, he's not seen as a guy who is outward like that. But 21 wins as of today, 21 wins, 3 losses and 1 no contest. So looking at his losses, first of all, very early in his career, lost to Claudio Silva via split decision, and then went on a 2-fight win run. Obviously, he's a prospect at this point, so you can't put too much into these. Lost to Usman in the first fight, then went on a crazy winning run. After Usman, beat Dominic Waters, beat Albert Tumanov, beat Vicente Luque, Brian Barberena, Peter Sabata. Cerrone, Nelson, RDA. Then obviously had the no contest with Bilal Muhammad. Then fought Nate Diaz, beat him, and then that's when we get into the 2 Usman fights where he won. So, with Leon Edwards, why I say he is the great. So this, I'll say the records are irrelevant at this point because Leon's career is not done, whereas Bisping's is done. However, one thing why I believe you have to look at, this is why context is important a lot in MMA. This is why you can never really look at 2 people and think it's the same thing. You want to look at, for example, look at GSP and Usman when people comparing them. I often maintain that I think a lot of Usman's opponents were tougher than GSP's opponents, but GSP had more title defenses, so that's the reason why people say he's the greatest welter, whatever. And he is. Let's be real. If Usman had beaten Edwards on Saturday night in London, I think maybe he'd have an argument and say he was. But now you look at it, you still give the edge to GSP. It's close though. Let's not get twisted. Usman's era was amazing, and he was a dominant champion. But we're at a point now. He lost twice to the same guy, knocked out cold the first time, or the second time technically, and then the third time, he got. I'm not gonna say schooled on the feet because he did well. Usman, it was a close fight, but he just didn't do enough to get the victory, and I think that's what his problem was. And I think Edwards was prepared for him this time round. And I look at Leon Edwards, and I think of his defining moment, that head kick against Kamaru Usman. Now, he was losing the fight against Usman up until that point. We all remember it. Got the head kick in the 5th round. Don't need to go over that. But the way he set it up was beautiful. But then I look at him, and in this second fight, I keep saying second, in the rubber match, in the third fight. The third fight, he didn't just get a win over a guy who is just seen as a champion. He beat Kamaru Usman, who's seen as he was the pound for pound best fighter in the world. He was seen potentially as the greatest welterweight of all time. And then you also look at the fact that Usman, at this point, he literally one loss in his career, and it's very early. He hadn't lost in the UFC up until that point. He'd beat Colby Covington twice, who was seen as the other best guy in the division. Knocked out Masvidal. Beat Gilbert Burns. He beat for everybody. Edwards was literally just the next guy in line. And that's what it was supposed to be, but he pulled out the victory, and everybody says, oh, it was a fluke. I don't believe this, and I don't think anybody who knows mixed martial arts believes that it was a fluke, but it is how some people won't want to paint it, and it won't happen this time around. This time around, Edwards showed in the second fight, I'm going to call it a second fight, in the rubber match, that he not only has improved from that fight with Usman the second time around, but he's also sort of molded himself into an elite mixed martial arts in almost every category. Wrestling wise, Usman could not take him down. And this is one thing I said about Usman. He's a great wrestler, but he's not a Khabib where he sticks to him. He will always take you down. He is somebody, Colby Covington said about him, he's not a chain wrestler. He's not someone who will constantly go at you and he wears on you. His knees are shot. There's things with Usman why I kind of end up picking Edwards in the end, because I just felt like it feels like he's slowly coming to the end here. And when I look at his striking, it's good, but compared to Leon Edwards, it's not the same. Leon Edwards is so crisp with his kicks, as we saw in the fight. His hands are better. He hasn't got the power. I think Usman's more of a powerful guy, but I don't really think it matters, because ultimately, whilst Usman's powerful, he's powerful if you allow him to sort of tee off on you. If you can come just negate it. It's not as if he is Alex Pereira, where he touches you when you're gone. He touched Edwards many times in the second fight. Couldn't hurt him. This fight never hurt him once. There was only one moment when one of those guys was hurting. It's when Edwards landed a knee on him in the clinch. So I don't really look at I never looked at Usman and I thought confidently that he'll 100% win this third fight. And I think it's the correct decision in the end, what happened in the fight. And Leon Edwards, the fact that he was able to beat a guy who was seen as the pound for pound king, not just once, but twice, and did it 2 different ways. Knocked him out the first and then got the decision in the second. And if I'm being honest with you, take out the points deduction, I think this is a clear win for Edwards. I'm not saying he was dominant, but I gave Edwards rounds 1, 4, and 5. And I mean, Usman, again, he tried in the fight, but he just couldn't do anything really that affected Edwards. And I think we're now at a point where Leon Edwards, if he can beat Colby Covington, You can maybe debate if he's the greatest British mixed martial artist of all time, but to me, if he beats Covington, I think it's set in stone. He would have then beaten the two best guys in the division. One thing about Bisping's title run consisted of him beating Rockhold, which was a great win, fighting a guy in Dan Henderson who didn't deserve it, a legend, but he didn't, and then fighting GSP, who's coming up from welterweight and had a 3-4 year layoff. It's not the same as what Edwards could potentially do here with Covington. And I think even without Covington, I think the fact that he was able to beat Usman, the fact that he also trains out of Birmingham, he brought the belt back to the UK, fought in the O2 in London. I think he's a staple of what British mixed martial artist should be. You know, he isn't just a boxer. Like, you look at Darren Till, just a kickboxer. His wrestling wasn't there. Bisping, similar, even though Bisping's take on defense was quite underrated. It's just a lot I think Edwards has gone from here, and I do think that he will go down as the greatest British mixed martial artist of all time. And I think he beats Colby. I think you got to put him up there in the pound for pound rankings as well. So yeah, it was an incredible victory though from Leon Edwards. Him and Colby is an interesting fight. You look at Colby, he hasn't got the power of Usman, he hasn't got the hands, but he's a very quick. He keeps a pace on you, and I'll be honest, I don't think that Colby will be able to tire out Edwards. And the more I kind of think about it, the way Colby gets touched to the body, he doesn't like the body shots. The way Edwards, he is snapping kicks, they are so quick. I don't know, I feel like he may win that one as well, and I just think that you may see a point now where Leon Edwards is now starting to get that respect, and people are now starting to see what he is. And that is one of the best in the world. And like I said, for me, the greatest British mixed martial artist of all time. An incredible fighter, someone with such a well-rounded game, amazing takedown defense. Usman could not take him down. He took him down, I think, 3 out of 11, if I'm correct, or whatever it was. It was an incredible performance from Leon Edwards, and yeah, don't get it wrong, Bisping's a legend, but to me, he's the greatest Leon Edwards when it comes to British MMA. He should be the one that people look to, and I think the fact that he got such a memorable knockout and then was able to show that he wasn't just a fluke and got it done again in the rematch, to me, just shows you what kind of fight we're dealing with, and the fact that he didn't let the bell get to his head. And now we have to see what he's about. He beat the same guy twice. Can he now do it against other contenders? Can he build a long reign? Can he potentially, I felt like when Woodley was champion, Woodley could have been seen as maybe the greatest welterweight. He never was there, but there was talks of it. And then Usman came and he kind of took that mantle. Now he was seen as maybe one of the greatest. Can Edwards take that and do better? We'll see. I think this division it shapes up nicely for him. I think if Chimaev doesn't stay in this division, I think that's a hard fight for Leon, but take him out. I think he can beat Burns. I think he beats Masvidal. I think he'll beat Colby. I'm saying this now, maybe I'll change my mind when the fight comes closer, and he was beating the brakes off of Bilal up until the point of the eye poke. So yeah, I think that we've seen the evolution of a great martial arts, and a guy who at one point had no respect. People laughed at him. He's now the champion and has beat what was seen as the pound for pound king twice. Knockout first and decision second time. Yeah, an amazing fighter. An amazing fight as well. I think Bisping, like I said, we got to respect him, but Edwards beat a guy who was seen as a pound for pound king, whereas Bisping's was a bit different. He beat a guy who just won the belt. There's a lot of things that go in Edwards' favour, but two legends of British MMA, no doubt, and they should be on the mount. There isn't really a Mount Rushmore of British MMA at the moment, but I feel give it 20 years, we all know those two will be on there, and incredible to see from Edwards. And yeah, just my thoughts though on Usman and Edwards 3. I think Edwards won that fight 3 rounds to 2. And yeah, I say 3 rounds to 2 because even the round that Usman won was very close, and they had the point deduction. So, and there's one thing I will say though, Edwards, though, he needs to relax with his low kicks, and I get it, and the cage grabs. We'd rather not see that, but the game's the game, I guess. But yeah, just my thought on Usman Edwards 3, and yeah, until next time.